What's going on, guys? Andrew of Newmark Gaming back here today to talk about some Yu-Gi-Oh! Vrains episode 75. Now, this episode gave us a good amount to talk about, and I want to touch on a couple things I actually forgot to hit upon in my last episode review. But let's go ahead and jump right into it here. I just want to start off by saying, turns out my prediction was right. Go did essentially have an AI artificially inserted into his brain, and that's just crazy to me. Basically, the story arc that we're watching Go undergo right now actually has come to remind me a lot of what we saw Zane Truesdale go through in Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, also known as Hellkaiser if you're talking in the sub. So, how are they paralleling exactly? Well, Zane's this excellent duelist, right? He's fantastic throughout Season 1, he's the only person who actually manages to beat Jaden, and then never loses to Jaden. He suffers one major loss as soon as he enters the pro leagues. He gets desperate, he takes on this dark deck and dark new personality in order to regain his power, finds himself on a new winning streak, but at what cost? He's putting himself in greater and greater danger, and eventually it comes to be the death of him before that questionable revival of his character in Season 4. But regardless, let's take a look at Go's Onizuka's storyline parallel to that. While Go's main win streak and his high point in his dueling career wasn't necessarily shown on screen the way Zane had Season 1 to show that off for him, Go was known to be one of the most reputable charisma duelists in all of Vrains. He was essentially a celebrity before Yusaku comes along and beats him, and then he suffers repeated losses from there on, losing to Revolver, losing to Soulburner, etc. So with those happening, he finds himself in this pinch where he's trying to get his winning streak back, right? Well, where Zane strolled to this dark deck, this cyber dark deck that he ends up using that costs him this, Go strolls to this AI implant. We see Go's heart vitals start increasing and everything else. What killed Zane Truesdale? His heart gave out because it couldn't handle using these cyber dark cards anymore. So with that being the case, I almost think the writers are intentionally referencing this. Now, while we're on the subject of Go and this AI implant, let's talk about some of the side effects of this. He keeps talking about seeing this other world, and every time I think they're trying to show that to us on screen, it's something like this sort of internet and space combined. It's sort of like cyber space, I guess, is sort of what they're trying to have him see there. But regardless, it seems like his brain is literally being altered by this AI, and I think we're seeing less and less of Go and more possibly this AI taking over him. Part of me is wondering if the reason that this isn't working is because the AI may have malicious intentions, or perhaps it's there by Soul, and Soul's trying to turn him purely into a pawn of their doing. After all, his main intention for doing all this in the first place was to take his title back and beat Playmaker, yet at the end, when he finally has that duel, he just accepts the fact that they're forcibly logging him out and has this huge smirk on his face that he got to show off. So part of me wonders if Soul is behind this. And regardless, we got these side effects of the weird visions. He's now able to create his own duel skill, of which is called anti-skill, where he essentially blocks a skill, but even when he uses that, he has these veins popping out of him, very reminiscent of what we used to see when Merrick would be taken over by his Yami form in Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters. It's also a bit of a trope for insanity within the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime, amongst probably some other ones as well. So with that being the case, it shows, I think, Go really is losing control here. Very, very rarely in Yu-Gi-Oh! In the past have we had a character have those veins pop where they're still genuinely in control of their own actions. So getting back to the whole Soul Technologies thing, and perhaps this is just a tool for them to basically abuse Go's desires and take over, let me take a moment to point out, okay, that wouldn't sound like something Akira would do, right? Well, let's not forget who's really in charge of Soul Technologies here. Queen. At least from what we've seen so far, it is possible, since we have had multiple people named after chess pieces, that perhaps it's somebody above her that's genuinely in charge, but nonetheless, it could either be Queen or King, I would guess, or maybe they co-lead it. But regardless, we've seen Queen. We've seen that she's willing to send Go out to duel Earth in the last episode, despite the various health risks that Akira warns her of, and that everybody's basically warned her of. Akira's basically telling Go, look man, stop, you're going to literally kill yourself doing this. And Queen's like, nah, dude, we're gonna make all the bank off of this. Just keep going. Just keep trucking along. It's worth it. We're gonna make big cash. He's gonna help save us. And if he dies in the process, well, it was his choice. And Go's like, yeah, man, I'm getting the power I want. Just keep trucking along. But is that Go's free will? Once more, I'm really wondering. This implant was created by Soul Technologies. We have no reason to trust them. The only person in Soul Technologies that has shown genuine good faith of character is Akira. The secretary girl, whose name I don't remember too well, seems to be alright as a character and moral wise. And then yeah, that's about it from Soul Technologies. Everybody else we haven't really been able to trust so far. They seem to be manipulating this, and it was somebody who formerly worked for them that created the Ignises in the first place, and then essentially like went mad destroying it. Like, they're at the root of everything that's going on right now, regardless of where you lie on like whether the Ignises were a good idea or a bad idea and everything else. They're at the root of everything that's going on. So the idea of them puppeteering everyone involved in some way, shape, or form just seems more and more likely in my mind the further we go. I think they've got a little bit of a lack of control in the situation right now, but I do think we're very much heading towards them maybe turning out to be puppeteering the situation or in some way, shape, or form being our overall main antagonists. So moving right along from that, while we're on the topic of Soul Technologies, we are really starting to see a little bit of a clash between Akira and Queen. We get the flashbacks where Go's essentially explaining what he's going through in this episode and what he did to himself with the whole AI implant. We see that Akira drops this information on him about all the risks and everything, and then just kind of keeps himself quiet. Now, some people could take that as Akira knows the risks, but he doesn't want to discourage Go from doing it because he wants Go to participate because he needs Go in order to complete his job. But given from what we've seen in Akira in the past, the way he often seems to morally side with Playmaker and seem to generally have the right thing in mind, I have a feeling this was more of Akira being like, yeah, I was told to inform you about this. I don't agree with it whatsoever, but I really can't afford to lose my job because I do have a younger sister that's counting on me, so I'm going to drop the information on you. I'm going to be very, very subtle. I'm going to be very, very quiet about it, and I'm not going to encourage you to do it whatsoever, but I am required, I am an employee to tell you about this because I was instructed to do so. Go describes it as him being dropped in front of Hell's Gate and then Akira abandoning him. I think it was quite the opposite. I think that's sort of accurate, but the way it comes out of Go's words, at least in the sub, strikes me as Akira's trying to manipulate him into doing something he shouldn't. I think Akira's in a position where he can't get out of telling him something he shouldn't do, like telling him that option is available, but he really doesn't want Go to do it. He's aware of all these health risks. And then if we cut to the ending scene when we see the Earth Ignis being dissected and everything, and Akira's pain at that, and the consistent times where Akira's trying to ask the Queen to stop, and the fact that Akira is working more and more alongside Yusaku/Playmaker, I'm very much under the impression that before the end of this arc, or before the end of the show for sure, we're going to see Akira really starting to act as a mole to undermine Soul Technologies' plans. As they get more and more into this dark zone that he can't agree with, I think we're going to find Akira in a situation where he can't necessarily just deny his morals or play in the gray zone anymore, and he's going to have to pick a distinctive side. Especially the way Aoi is heading. Speaking of which, I forgot to touch upon this in the last episode review. Aoi seems to be developing a lot more independence in the fact that she wants to protect these other two Ignises, which goes directly against Soul Technologies' ideas in that they want to capture all of them and dissect them like they did with the Earth Ignis. But Aoi wants to protect Earth. She wants to protect Aqua. She wants to figure out what's going on. She's kind of investigating things to some extent on her own. She's starting to give Emma orders. All of those things, I don't think just because she's developing independence, Akira's going to suddenly turn against his sister. So between his own moral questioning of what Soul's doing and the fact that his sister is really starting to oppose Soul Technologies almost directly, I think we're going to see an Akira Zaizen that eventually is going to spin away from the people who are his so-called employers. Of course, playing to the other side to that for a second, we do have Akira showing genuine concern for Go losing to the Earth Ignis in this episode, but I think that's more of a concern for Go's health, and he also was directly located inside Soul Technologies, so he can't openly oppose them within there very well, especially when he has all these other workers around him that could easily get around very quickly, and I think that was before Akira started to head towards his breaking point. And while we're on the subject of Akira's breaking point, I think we're really heading towards that with the ending scene of this episode, which I think was handled very well. When we have Earth being dissected and we gradually see his memories slipping away from him, he's debating that. He even ends up tearing up. Akira's kind of shielding his eyes, turning his face away to the corner. I think he's really starting to genuinely realize this company is not okay. Their objectives are not morally correct, and there's nothing about them that really screams even a gray area. They're outright willing to do whatever it takes to make more money. They're willing to destroy something that they initially had even ordered to be created, and something that has emotions, and something that could probably even help to save humanity in the Earth Ignis. And, on top of the weight of that scene, and to build up Soul Technologies being these villains, we have Spectre, who's on the sides of the Knights of Hanoi, who want to destroy the Ignis. even tear up at the fact that Earth died. He kind of cringes, and we have a teardrop from him. And I think it was even more effective on the writer's part to only have Spectre in it for that little glimpse. A character that we've otherwise, outside of his loyalty to Revolver and his desire to go back to the Lost incident, we've seen very little positive or empathetic emotion from this character whatsoever. Even he's upset by what Soul's doing, by the fact that the Earth Ignis died. And I think, throw that on top of the emotional weight of the scene to begin with, and you've got probably one of the best scenes in the show so far. The Earth Ignis going into this probably had the strongest relationship to any other individual character in the show so far, and they really built up this idea of how he wants to protect Aqua, and how his objectives were arguably the most relatable of anybody in the show. He wasn't choosing a side. He had very down-to-earth emotions towards another character. He wasn't as big of a player in the overarching scheme of things, so I think Earth as a character was probably one of the most relatable. I mean, a lot of times within our own lives, most of us aren't necessarily involved in this huge overarching struggle of things a lot of days, but we are involved in these day-to-day routines, developing relationships with other people, caring for those that are immediately around us that we give a crap about. And that's what really all Earth was doing, and I think he eventually would have sided with Yusaku and Aoi, and had he had the chance, against the others. But still, he was very down to earth. He was kind of keeping some distance from the thing, and I just liked his character a lot, and I think they handled this really well. The music was fantastic with the subtle pianos in the background and everything else. So with everything else happening in this episode, we also got the fact that Go manages to synchro summon. He uses an entirely new skill that he invented, and he wins the duel with this rather malicious overall expression on his face. I think that adds more to the Soul Technologies antagonist theory, and I think we're definitely spelling towards another duel between Yusaku and Go Onizuka. And I know I say this every time, but I think this could be a genuine opportunity, maybe our last genuine opportunity for Yusaku to lose a duel. I really don't think he will at this point, but I think that'll be a good one to watch. I'm hoping he gets through to Go. I don't really want to see Go be a villain, especially considering I think he had a lot of potential in Season 1 that they wasted in terms of him being like the main ally to Yusaku, and that role was kind of swiped from him in some ways by Soul Burner. I would like to see Go come back to the good side and at least have like one more major play for the good side, rather than just kind of fading off into the distance as this awkward antagonist or being evil the rest of the show. We'll have to see how that plays out. So with all that being said, guys, let's go ahead and move on to the little clip we get at the end of this, right before we get our closing for the show, and then we get a little clip of what's coming in the next episode. Aoi says a single line to Emma. She says, "I'm confused. What is an Ignis?" Now, a couple things I want to point out about this. First off being, this hits Aoi right after Earth dies. Earth had a lot of connections to who? Aqua. And the other AIs were reacting as soon as Earth died, and Aqua was especially connected to Earth, so we can assume she probably had a pretty strong reaction as well. And I made a theory a long time ago about Aoi potentially being connected to Aqua, given how Spectre reacted to Earth's death, because Earth was the Ignis tied to Spectre, and Aqua could quite well be tied to Aoi, and Aqua had a especially strong connection to Earth. Maybe Aoi's responding to that. Now, the other side to this is maybe Aoi was just watching the footage of the dissection, the fact that Earth was crying, the fact that this was kind of the first time we saw a lot of heavy emotions coming out of Ignis. Maybe it confused her, because that's not necessarily something you typically see out of the other AIs in the show, and maybe that kind of threw her off her game, made her take a little bit of a step back towards the perspective. It seems like the next episode we're getting definitely shows Aoi in a very reflective state, so I think it's very possible it is just her having seen such strong emotions out of an AI, it's making her rethink a lot of things, or maybe it is just the death of Earth, or maybe it was something that was triggered by a connection she shares with Aqua. Regardless, they're definitely hinting towards that connection with Aqua, because they say, she says at the end of our little hint towards the next episode, "How does Aqua know me?" It also mentions her needing to make more friends. She thought she could get by on her own, and that leads to an interesting set of theories in and of itself, because we do see a lot of Revolver in the real world here, talking within the preview for the next episode. So the question becomes to me, who is that friend that they're very much hinting Aoi's going to pick up in this next episode? Is it because it talks about a kind voice coming to her? Is it going to be Aqua? And Aqua's reaching out and being like, "Hey, I felt something when Earth died. I think maybe we're connected after all." Or, because we did see a lot of Revolver in the real world here, I'm thinking it may quite well be him. After all, his father was the one who ran the Lost incident and oversaw everything, so it wouldn't be at all surprising if Revolver knows everybody that was involved in the Lost incident, so he's aware it's Aoi, and he figures now is the time to let her know. Revolver has also shown us in the episode where he goes to help Yusaku, gives him something to essentially shield him from being hacked, or hacked by the other AI, I'm sorry, that he is kind of recruiting allies to his cause regardless of what the cost may be at this point. He acknowledges the fact that eventually he and Yusaku are going to have to clash as a result of their beliefs, but there's a bigger enemy at play here that they both can agree to fight against. So, and Aoi would be in the same boat if she's connected to Aqua, I'm sure, but it seems like he's willing to set that aside for now. He may figure now's the time for me to increase the power of an already strong duelist, to have her on my side to take out these other two Ignises. That way we can go ahead and proceed forward. If that's the route they're heading, I'm very excited, guys. It would be awesome to see another prediction come through, and on top of that, I think it would add a lot to Aoi and Revolver's characters, two characters that I think have had strong introductions, but we need to see more of, and it's spinning us away from a very Playmaker-centric show, which is another thing I enjoy. On the whole, guys, I thought this was a very good episode, especially for one that was still part of a duel. I found that so far in the show, I've been usually disappointed by a lot of the episodes that are very duel focused, but this one had a lot of plot. Be sure to let me know of your thoughts and comments in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like and subscribe. If not, constructive criticism is always welcome, and I'll catch you guys next time talking about some more Yu-Gi-Oh! Vrains.